Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be creating a card using a stamp set from Gina K Designs. This is a stamp set that Gina sent to me. Thank you, Gina. And I've had it like in the back of my stash. I've been thinking about it, wanting to create something with it for quite a while. So here we are today. I'm going to be creating an autumn colored card for you guys. And I'm going to do some metallic elements on top with two different colors of embossing powder. I really think you're going to enjoy it. So let's get into it, and I hope you enjoy the card. Like I mentioned, I'm using a stamp set from Gina K Designs today. This is the UR stamp set. It has a really fun wreath element with other pieces that you can kind of fill in the gaps around the wreath. So this is a really large wreath stamp, and I wanted to test out how it would perform with the ink on it, because sometimes these stamps that have a really big blank area in the center can sometimes get a little bit of ink on them and then it transfers to your project. So I'm using some scratch paper just to test this out. Turns out that my stamp does put a little tiny bit of ink right in the center. So I'm going to perform some stamp surgery after I've cleaned it off really well. And I'm going to be cutting out that very center of the wreath stamp. I want to be really careful and not cut into the actual image of the stamp. I'm just cutting out the center. So I'm just doing fold it in half, and I'm doing two little cuts so that it sort of cuts out a diamond shape out of the center of that stamp. And that's going to make it so it's a little bit easier once I start working on my actual project. Before I do the wreath stamping, I'm going to do some ink blending, and I'm using 3 different colors of distress ink, and I haven't ever used these colors before. I can't believe it. I'm starting out with Fossilized Amber, and I'm going to be blending these so that it's kind of a central circular shape, and it blends out into nothing, into the white cardstock. So I'm using a very, very light hand, and I'm just getting those colors moving around. Now at this point, when I was seeing those larger splotches of color right in the center, I was starting to doubt myself if I would be able to kind of build up this blending so that it looked nice and smooth. So I did bring in another piece of scratch paper, and I'm adding ink to my blending tool, dabbing off on that scratch paper, and then coming to my project. And that takes away some of that initial really strong inking, and it makes it a little bit easier to blend it out. So I moved on from Fossilized Amber to Fired Brick, and the same thing happened with the Fired Brick. There were just areas where the foam tool just hit the paper when the ink was a little bit too strong. So I had kind of this splotchiness, which if you keep blending and intensify the color, you can generally get rid of some of that splotchiness. But I didn't want to make this super, super dark. But I persevered and I kept going and moved on to the color Dusty Concord. I'm going to do the same thing with this purple shade. I'm going to blend it right below that Fired Brick. And once again, I kind of got these splotches on it. Now, if you've seen a picture of the final card, you probably don't notice those splotches. And that's because I think as the distress ink dries, and since I put things on top of it, I think it disguises some of the splotchiness, and it's not even that noticeable at all. So if you are in an instance where it's like this and you're kind of doubting your blending skills, keep at it. Go ahead and finish your card, because sometimes all of that blending really won't be that noticeable. I went back and blended a little more Fossilized Amber at the top just to round out that shape and have a little more yellow near the top of the card. And then I brought that wreath stamp back and I inked it up in soft navy ink from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to stamp that directly over the top of this blending, making sure I'm using a cloth to clean off any ink that may have transferred to the center of that area, and then I'll press that down and stamp it. And I'm actually going to stamp this twice so that I get a nice deep dark image. It almost looks black because this soft navy ink is so dark. It almost looks like it's black, but it totally works out in the end. I really like this navy shade with the metallic embossing I'm going to be putting on top. Speaking of, because I am doing some embossing on top, I'm going to heat set this and just really make sure that area is completely dry. I want to make sure that when I apply embossing powder, that none of it's going to stick to this blended area. So I'm adding some anti-static powder tool, and then I'm testing that embossing powder. So the color of embossing powder I'm using this first time is some antique gold embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp. And it's a good thing I tested it because it wasn't completely dry. A little bit of the embossing powder stuck to that center area. So I was able to wipe it off and then dry it some more. And after this and second drying, it seemed to work out just fine. The embossing powder just slid right off that blended area. So now I'm going to stamp the greeting from the stamp set. You have a main greeting word that says you, and then you've got a few different options for how to finish the phrase. The one that I'm using today is "You are amazing." And I first stamped the large script U, and I coated that in the antique gold embossing powder. I'll shake off the excess, and then I'll hit that with my heat tool and melt that embossing powder until it's smooth and melted. You want to make sure that all of it is melted. I then went and stamped the "are amazing" greeting. So this finishes the whole greeting area, and these greetings are sized perfectly to go inside that large wreath. So you've got a few different options in the stamp set. There's a "you are loved," "you are amazing." There's a few different things to choose from. I just chose to use this one because I want to keep this as a generic card that I can send to a friend or family. So I added that same embossing powder on top. And then now I'm going to be using some individual acrylic blocks to make little tiny stamped images. There are all these little leaves and twigs and flower images in the stamp set, and I'm going to be stamping these around the outside of this wreath to sort of fill out that area. I started with a leaf shape, and I used the same gold embossing powder for that. And then I stamped this flower. And I thought it would be kind of fun to bring in a different color of embossing powder. So now I'm using copper embossing powder from WOW. This has a nice coppery, it almost has a rose gold kind of look to it. And it's going to really complement the more autumn and fall colors that I have going here. So after I stamped that flower, I then came in and stamped some additional kind of leaves, these little curved leaf shapes. And I kind of spaced them around the wreath. I didn't want them to be too close to each other. I stamped those in some more Versamark ink and then applied the copper embossing powder. At this point, I decided I wanted to add 2 more flowers. So I'm going to add one near the top, and then I'm also going to have one on the right side of this card, right off to the side of the greeting. And I stamped and embossed both of these flowers in that same copper embossing powder. I then added some additional leaves and twigs, just moving all around, and I made sure all of it was heat set before moving on. At this point, I decided that I wanted to have these flowers have color behind them. And because embossing powder has a slick surface, it will resist any of the ink put on top. So you have the unique opportunity to blend over top of the embossing, and it looks like you did that blending before you embossed. It's kind of a cool technique. So I took those same 3 colors and used some blending tools, these blending stumps, to add the color behind those flowers. And I really think it gives this a more purposeful look as far as flowers go. I then took the 3 little berry stamp from the stamp set, and I used that soft navy ink, and I added some of these berries just in different areas along this wreath. I thought it needed a little bit more of an organic feel, and adding in these berries in just different areas on the wreath, I thought it really finished off the whole design. I'm going to add one more thing of berries down here at the bottom underneath that purple flower. And then I've got all the berries on here that I want. Now I'm going to prep my card base. I'm using some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock. This is the 110-pound version. And I scored that at 5.5 to create a top folding card. And then applied some Tombow Extreme adhesive on the back of my blended piece. And then pressed that down directly onto the front of the card. So this pretty much finishes up this card. It was super easy to put together. Oh, just kidding. I didn't finish here. I did have a couple little splotches that I messed up and I wanted to clean them up. So I used a Tombow sand eraser to sand away those areas, and then you can't even tell that I had a problem there. Okay, now the card is completely finished. I really love how that turned out. I love the shimmer and shine of both of those colors of embossing powder. I seriously love the color combo on this particular card. I've never used those 3 colors together before. In fact, I had to start new ink blending tools for each one of those colors, so I don't know how I've gone so long without using all of those colors on a card. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I'm going to put 2 more cards on screen for you to check out. These are going to be autumn or Halloween type cards for you. I'm going to be jumping into the holiday card series really fast here, so I'm not going to be showing a whole lot more of these, but I hope you guys enjoy the suggestions down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in another video very soon.